Quick demo of this tutorial. In this tutorial, we will discuss how to implement user registration from scratch in Angular 5 application with Web API and ASP.NET Identity Membership System. In the next tutorial, we will extend these projects in order to demonstrate user authentication, login and logout using token-based authentication. So here we have the final product from this tutorial. Now I am going to add a new user. Username will be Angelica, then password will be 1234, then email is not mandatory, even though I will give it as angelica123@gmail.com. Then we have first name, it will be Angelica, then last name will be Ramos, Angelica Ramos. Now click on submit. So here we have created a new user, Angelica Ramos. Apart from this, we have discussed a lot of things like form validation. I have made this username and password as required, and we have set minimum characters inside this password. Email is not mandatory, even though it should be a valid email. Inside this Web API project, we have discussed how to use ASP.NET Identity, how to customize their fields. So I hope you will find this tutorial helpful for your upcoming Angular 5 application with Web API. So please watch till the end of this video tutorial. What's up YouTube? Welcome to .NET Mob. In this tutorial, we will discuss how to implement user registration or user sign up in Angular 5 with Web API. In one of our previous video, we have discussed how to implement CRUD operations in Angular 5 with Web API. If you are interested in these video tutorials or text articles, you can find their links in video description. Before starting this video tutorial, I would like to ask you a favor. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video. If you are new here, please be subscribed to this channel .NET Mob. First of all, we will create an Angular 5 application and then we will design the front end. After that, we will create the Web API project. In order to create an Angular 5 application, I will be using this IDE, Visual Studio Code Editor. I want to create the Angular application inside this project folder. So let me copy this folder path from here. Then back to Visual Studio Code Editor. Then go to File. Then Open Folder. Then paste the folder path here, hit enter, then select the folder. In order to create an Angular application, you can use Angular CLI command in your command prompt, or in case of this IDE, we have integrated terminal. For that, go to view, then integrated terminal. In order to create an Angular application, you can use this command ng new, then application name. I will name this application as Angular 5. Hit enter. Creation of this project is in progress. We have a new folder with name Angular 5. Inside that, it is installing default packages from npm. It will take some time to complete, so please be patient. So here we successfully created the Angular 5 application. Now let's start designing this application. In previous projects, we have used Bootstrap as a front-end framework. In this project, we will use Materialize CSS as a front-end framework. Okay, here is the official website for the framework, materializecss.com. It is one of the trending modern responsive front-end framework. In order to use this front-end framework, we have to add these style sheet and JavaScript reference inside the application. For that, let me open index.html from the application, open src, there you can see index.html. So first of all, let me copy the style sheet reference, copying and pasting inside the head part. Now let's copy the script file, pasting before the body end tag. In order to work this JavaScript file for Materialize, we have to add jQuery library. So let me add script reference for jQuery here. Now let's add required component, service and model classes inside this application. For that, you can use the integrated terminal from this IDE. Let me open one more terminal. For that, you can click on this plus button here. As you can see here, my folder path is too long. In order to hide this path, you can use this command prompt then $, hit enter. Currently we are inside a folder with name project. Now we have to change the directory into this folder Angular 5. For that you can use this cd command then Angular 5. In order to create an Angular 5 component, you can use this command ngg-generate c4 component then component name. I will name this component as sign up, hit enter. Here we have a problem with my Angular CLI version. If you get this problem, we have to update the Angular CLI version. For that, you can open one more terminal here, npm update -g then Angular CLI. Hit enter, it will update our Angular CLI. So here we successfully updated Angular CLI. Now open package.json file. Here it is, package.json. Inside that you can see Angular CLI inside dev dependencies. Where we want to update this version like this, just copy this prefix and pasting here. Okay, then save this file package.json. Currently we are inside the folder with name project. We have to switch the current folder as Angular 5. For that, cd then Angular 5, hit enter. Now you can use this command npm update, hit enter. After that, everything should work as expected. Now back to the previous terminal where we tried to create a component sign up. Now let's try this command again, ngg-generate c4 component then component name as sign up, hit enter. So here we successfully created the component sign up. You can see the newly created component inside this app folder. Now we have to create a service and model class. For that, let me add one extra folder here, new folder. I will name this folder as shared. Inside that we can create the service and model class. For that, right click on the folder, then open in terminal. In order to create a service class in Angular applications, you can use this command ng then g for generate, s for service. We want to create a user service class, so I will just type user here, hit enter. Newly created service class can be seen inside the shared folder. Finally, we need to create a model class. Actually, there is no specific Angular CLI command to create a model class, but we can do this. Ng g for generate, then we have to create a class file. Our model class name will be user, so just type user, then add this option double hyphen type is equal to model, hit enter. So here we created the model class user. In this application we will deal with details of users. So we want to add properties corresponding to user details. So here it is, we have username, then password, email, first name and last name. Now let me save all of these modifications here. Now we have to run this application. For that, let me delete previous terminals from here. And we want to open one new terminal. In order to run this application, first of all, we have to change the current folder as Angular 5. So just type this command Angular 5 cd Angular 5, then use this command ng serve double hyphen open. It will compile the application and launch our application in our default browser. In my case, it is Google Chrome. So this is how the default application looks like. We have to customize this interface as per our requirement. Now back to the IDE. I want to change the background color of this application. For that, inside this index.html, I will add the style attribute with hexadecimal color code like this. Okay. Inside this index.html, here we can see this selector app-root. That means it will replace by the text inside the default component of an Angular application. As you know, root component of an Angular application is app component itself. Corresponding HTML will be this one, app component.html. Instead of this default HTML, we need a div with class container. As we have discussed in previous videos, this is an AMET abbreviation to create a div with class container. Now hit tab, it will create a div with class container. Inside this div, we will show this component HTML, sign up component HTML. For that, we have to use the corresponding component selector, app-sign up. Let me copy this and paste in here. Now let me save all of these modifications. Now back to the application here. So here we have the background color due to the hexadecimal color code, and here we have the text from sign up component. Now instead of this text, we have to show a form for user registration. Now let's look how we can create that form. Back to the IDE here, then open the corresponding component HTML, sign up component.html. Inside this HTML file, we will create a form for user registration. Before that, here we have the global style sheet file style.css. Inside that, I want to paste some predefined CSS rules for this application. So here it is. Let me save this. Back to the component HTML. First of all, we want a div with class row. Hit tab. Here we are going to use the grid system from Materialize CSS. So first of all, we need a div with class call. Then we need a class S8. This is like call MD8 in Bootstrap. Then we need to add an offset of 2 columns from left and right. For that, we can add this class offset-s2. Hit tab. Inside this div, I want to add a card from the framework. So here it is. Let me search for card here. It will almost look like this. We will have a header, card header. Below that, we will have the content. Inside that content, we will display our user registration form. Now let's look how we can design that card here. First of all, we need a div with class card. Hit tab. Inside that, we want to show a header for form title. So we need a div with class sm-jumbotron. This is a custom class which we have defined inside our style sheet styles.css, and we need another class from the framework sender-align. Hit tab. Inside that, we need an h2 header. Inside that, we will show user registration. Let me save these and back to the application here. So here we have the form title user registration. Below that, we want to show a form for user registration. So below this form header, we need a form with class call, then s12, then we need the background color as white, then hit tab. So here we have a form with given classes. You don't need this action attribute here. Let me remove that. I want to design this form which is similar to this form from the documentation of the framework forms.html. So our form almost look like this. Okay, in order to design a form like this, first of all, I'm going to add a div with class row. Inside this Angular application, we are going to design a template driven form. So I want to set the local reference for this form as user registration form. User registration form is equal to ng form. Inside this div, this is like a single line. Inside that, we want to split the row into 2 halves. So we can add a div with class input field, input-field, and we can use these grid classes called then S6. Like this, we need one more div. So let me copy this. Sorry, here we have misspelled this class input field. Let me copy this and pasting below that. Okay, now inside this first div we want to show a text box for username. So we need an input element, input, and we want to name this text box as username. In order to design this form with template driven approach, we need a property inside this TypeScript component TypeScript file. So first of all, I'm going to define a property user. It's of the type user model class. Now we have to add an import statement for this user model class. For that you can use this shortcut, hold Control then press period. So here we have the corresponding import statement. Click on this. So here we have added corresponding import statement for user model class. First of all, let me add a local reference for this text box. Username is equal to ng model. Then we need two-way data binding. So here it is, ng model is equal to user dot username. Inside this user model class, we have a property username. Inside this text box, we are going to bind this username property. After this input text box, we need a label. We don't need this for attribute. Let me remove that. Then label text will be username. Like this, we can add text box for password inside the second div here. Let me paste it here. I will change the reference as password. Local reference will be password and replacing in appropriate places. User.password, then label text will be password. Like this, we can add a label text box pair for rest of the properties from user model here. Email, first name and last name. So here it is. We have added label text box pair for email, first name and last name. Let me save this. After these form controls, we need a submit button. So here it is. We have a button of the type submit. Here we have the button text as submit. In order to work this template driven form, we have to import forms module inside app module.ts file here. First of all, we have to add import statement for the class. Import from Angular forms. We have to import forms module. We have to add the same class inside this imports array here. Let me save all of these modifications and back to the application here. Boom. So here we have created a user registration form in Angular 5 with Materialize CSS. Now inside this component TypeScript file, I want to add a reset form function which will reset this form controls to its initial state. Reset form. For this function, we have a single parameter form. It's of the type ng form. We have to add an import statement for this class. For that, you can use the shortcut, hold Control, then use period. Click on this import statement. So here we have added corresponding import statement here. First of all, we want to call the reset function from this class. So you can do this form.reset. Then we want to reset properties inside this user object. For that, you can do this dot user is equal to username, password, email, first name and last name is initialized with an empty string. First of all, we want to call this function from ngOnIt lifecycle hook. For that, we can do this dot reset form function. Here we don't have a value for this form parameter, so I'm going to make this parameter as nullable and we want to add an if statement here. We need to call this reset function only when form parameter is not null. Okay. Now I want to add form validation inside this form. For that, I'm going to make this username and password as a mandatory field for this form. So you can add required attribute for these text boxes, username and password. Required attribute. So here we have added required attribute to these two text boxes. Let me save this and back to the application here. If I try to enter something inside this username text box and then clear the text box, here you can see a validation error or indication with red border. These styles are added inside the style.css file here. If there is an input control with these two classes ngInvalid and ngDirty, these two styles will be applied to that control. That is what we have seen here. Same can be seen for this text box password also. By default, when a form loads, if that control is valid, then it will have a class ngValid. If that control is not valid, then it will have ngInvalid. Apart from that, it will have ngPristine class. If we change something inside that text box, ngPristine class will be replaced with ngDirty. If there is a text box with these two classes, ngInvalid and ngDirty, we will show the validation error. Apart from this red border, suppose we want to show a validation error. For that, you can use some methods from this Materialize CSS. So here it is. First of all, we want to add the class for these text boxes. Class is equal to validate. Then you can add error message inside this label attribute. Data-error is equal to required field. So here it is. Let me save this and back to the application here. Let me try to enter something inside this text box, and if I go out then focus in, you can see this error message required field. For this password text box, we have already added required attribute. We want to add one more validation. There should be at least 3 characters inside this password text box. Okay, for that we can add this attribute min length inside this text box. Min length is equal to 3. So then in order to show the validation error message, we can use this class validate. So let me add the class here. Class is equal to validate. In order to show error message, we can use this attribute data-error is equal to. Here we have a small problem. We have 2 types of validation here, required and min length. For these 2 validation, we need to show different validation error messages. For that, we can use the conditional data attribute from Angular. So here it is, attribute dot data-error. First of all, we will check whether there is an error or not. Here we have used this local reference password dot errors. If there is an error, we will check whether it is required or not. If the error is because of required validation, we will show this error message required field. Otherwise, we will show this message minimum 3 characters needed. Let me save this and back to the application here. Now you can see an error message minimum 3 characters needed. If I enter more than 3 characters, validation succeeded. Finally, we want to add validation for this email text box. That means text inside this text box should be of the form of a valid email. For that, I'm going to define a variable email pattern. Inside that, we have given regular expression for a valid email like this. we have to add the pattern attribute here. Pattern is equal to email pattern. So this name should be matched with this variable name here also. Now we have to validate this. So let me add this class here. Class is equal to validate. We want to show an error message. We can use this attribute data-error is equal to invalid email. So here it is. Let me save all of these modifications here and then back to the application. If I enter something inside this text box, if it is not a valid email, we can see this error message invalid email. If I complete this email with a valid email, validation succeeded. Okay. Here we have a small correction. When we want to validate a form control in Angular applications, this is what we normally do. We will check input controls with classes ngInvalid and ngDirty as we have discussed before. But in case of this front-end framework Materialize CSS, if we add this validate class to that form control, it will automatically manage its validation. If that control is not valid, it will automatically add invalid class from client side. We don't need to use these Angular classes inside this style sheet. Okay, if you are going to use some other front-end frameworks like Bootstrap, you may need to use these selectors to add your validation styles. For now we don't need this, so let me comment this here, saving and back to the application here. Finally, I want to disable this submit button when this form as a whole is not valid. Okay, for that we will add conditional disabled attribute to this submit button. I will add this disabled attribute here. Disabled attribute will be applied whenever this form as a whole is not valid. Let me save this and back to the application here. So initially this submit button is disabled. If I try to enter something inside these required text boxes, you can see that this submit button is enabled. In case of this form, email is not a mandatory field, but if we enter something inside this email text box, it should be in the form of a valid email. Finally, I want to make this text box type as password so that we can see a series of dots instead of original text. For that, you can go to this HTML here. Here we have the password text box. Change this type to password. Let me save this and back to the application here. If I try to enter something inside, it will be shown as a sequence of dots. So here we have completed with this Angular 5 user registration form. In order to create a Web API project, here we have my Visual Studio. First of all, you can click on this new project here, or you can use the shortcut Ctrl+Shift+N, select web under Visual C#, then select ASP.NET Web Application. Name your application here. I will name it as Web API. Then select the folder where you want to save this application. Click on OK. Select Web API template. Then make sure that we have selected this no authentication option. Click on OK. So here we have created a brand new Web API project. In this Web API project, we are going to use ASP.NET Identity Membership System, which uses Entity Framework Code First approach. Don't worry if you are not aware or confused with ASP.NET Identity or DB First approach. We will start from scratch itself. ASP.NET Identity is a library or assembly from Microsoft itself. It provides a lot of features like user management, role management, user authentication, authorization, then unit testability, OWIN integration, email verification, password hashing, social logins like Facebook, Twitter, and Google, etc., 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 etc. So in this tutorial, we will use ASP.NET Identity to store user details inside identity tables. In the next tutorial, we will discuss ASP.NET Identity together with OWIN for user authentication like login and logout with Angular application. So let's look how we can use this ASP.NET Identity from scratch itself. First of all, we have to install ASP.NET Identity into this project. For that, right click on this project, then click on Manage a NuGet package, and inside Online you can search for ASP.NET Identity. So here it is, Microsoft ASP.NET Identity Entity Framework. Click on Install, click on Accept button. Now close this NuGet package window. Keep in mind that ASP.NET Identity table has a structure. If we want to change or add new columns or tables as per our requirement, we have to inherit classes from ASP.NET Identity. For that, I'm going to add a new class inside this models folder. Right click on it, then add class. I will name this class as Identity Models. First of all, we need a class with this name application user. We want to inherit this class from identity users. For that, we have to use this namespace Microsoft.ASP.NET.Identity.Entity framework. Okay, inside this identity user class, it has some default table structure for user informations. If we want to customize those columns or add new columns into the table, we can provide the customization inside this application user. Now we want to add one more class for inheriting DB-context class from ASP.NET Identity. So class will be something like this: public class application DB context inherit identity DB context class. It's of the type application user. Okay, application user. Inside the class, we will add the class constructor here, application DB context class, and we have inherited base class constructor here, and we have passed these two parameters: default connection, which is the connection string which we need to add inside this web config file. So here is the second parameter. Currently we don't have any customization here. Now we want to add a DB connection string inside this web config file with this name, default connection. Okay, so let me open this file, web.config. So inside this web config file, we have to add DB connection inside this configuration node. So it would be better if you can add the connection string before this configuration end tag here. So here it is, connection string. Here we have the connection string name, default connection. Here we have the SQL Server instance name. Here is the DB connection. So this is for DB first approach. Inside this user DB, you can store both user details and the real application data. Or you can keep separate database for user details and application data. You can store the user and role details inside this user DB, and you can create another database for application data, real application data. In that case, you need to add one more connection string for that real application DB. For that connection, you can use DB first, code first, or Dapper ORM, etc. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you are not a fan of DB first approach. You can use DB first approach for just user and role management, and for the second DB you can use any data integration as you wish. So back to the topic. So here we have made a connection between our database. Inside this connection, we have specified database name as UserDB, which we have not created yet. Here is the SQL Server instance which we have specified inside this connection. When we run this code first approach, it will automatically create this database inside this SQL Server instance. First of all, let me show you how these ASP.NET Identity tables looks like. For that, first of all, select the project, then go to Tools, Library Package Manager, then Package Manager Console. In code first approach, if we want some customization inside the database schema, first of all we will do that inside our C# code, and then we will do the migration in order to affect the existing or new database. For that, first of all, we want to enable migration inside this application. Don't worry, it is too simple. So first of all, we want to enable migration inside this application. For that, you can use this command, enable hyphen migrations, hit enter. So here we have enabled migrations. As part of that, here we have an extra folder migrations. Now I'm going to add a migration. Now just consider these migrations like restore point in Windows or like database backup. If we make some changes inside the DB model, we will add a migration with a name. If we want to restore that changes back to the application, we can use that migration. Okay, so first of all, I'm going to add a migration here, add hyphen migration, and I will name this migration as initial DB. Hit enter. Sorry, here we have a typo with this initial. Now we want to execute this update database command. Update database. So it will create or update database as per DB model. Hit enter. So here we have updated this database. Now back to Management Studio. Now refresh this databases node. Here we have the new database user DB. Inside this we can have these much tables from ASP.NET identity. This table is for logging migration history. Here we have the 5 tables from ASP.NET identity, ASP.NET roles, which is used to store roles inside this application like admin, user, and so and so. And here we have the user claims. Claims means details, extra details of a user, which we will discuss in next video. Okay. ASP.NET user logins are used to store details of user from social logins like Facebook, Twitter, and Google, etc. Here we have ASP.NET users. Inside that we will store the user details. Finally, we have ASP.NET user roles table. Inside that we will map these tables ASP.NET users and ASP.NET roles to identify roles assigned to each users inside this table. Now I want to customize this table's name from identity. I want to remove this prefix ASP.NET. So let's look how we can do that. In order to customize the DB model, we can go to identity models here. Here inside this application DB context class, I'm going to override a class from the base class, which is identity DB context. So here it is on model creating. Here we have a parameter of the type DB model builder. For that we have to use this namespace system.data.entity. In order to change table name from ASP.NET users to user, we have this model builder.entity application user. We want to change the name to users, and we have changed ASP.NET roles to role, and so and so. Okay. So here we have updated DB model in order to change table names. In order to see these changes inside this DB, we will add migration and then we will update the database. So first of all, add a migration, add migration. You can name this migration with a meaningful name. So I will just name this migration as changed default table names. Hit enter. So here we successfully added a migration. In order to see these changes, we can just execute this command, update database. So here we successfully updated the database. Now let me check whether it is updated or not. We want to refresh this tables node here. So here we updated table names. Now inside this users table, you can see that here we have some columns for storing user details, ID, email confirmed or not, password, hash, and here we have username and some other extra details like phone number confirmed or not. Apart from these default columns, we have to add some extra user details which we have added inside the Angular 5 application here. Inside the user model class, we have username, password, email, first name and last name. First name and last name are not there inside this DB. So now we want to add those two columns inside this table. For that, we want to add two properties inside this application user class here. Okay, so here it is, first name and last name. So inside this parent class identity user, we have these much default columns. Along with that, we have added first name and last name. Since we made a change inside this DB model, I'm going to add one more migration here. Add migration. I will change this migration name as change default column names. Hit enter. In order to update the table, you can use this command update database. Now back to Management Studio. I'm going to open this table design again. So here we have added first name and last name column. Okay, so here we have done with customizing this ASP.NET identity. Now let's look how we can add a new user inside this user table. For that, I'm going to add a new controller. So right click on controllers, then add controller, then select WebAPI2 controller empty. I will name this controller as account controller. So here we want to add a web API method with this root API /user/user, and this method will be of the type HTTP post. And here is the method public identity result. This method will return an object of this type identity result. For that, we have to use this namespace, and this method name will be register. Okay, we will consume this web API method when we submit this form. Okay, in order to pass these form values into this method, I'm going to add one extra class here. Right click on models, then add class. I will name this class as account model. Inside that, we will add properties corresponding to form controls inside the Angular application. Now I'm going to add a parameter for this web API, parameter of the type account model class, which we have just created. For that, we have to use this model's namespace model. First of all, in order to use ASP.NET identity, we want to create two parameters for user store and user management. For this, we have to use this namespace. Here we have created object of user store using DB context class. Using that user store, we have created user manager object here. Now I'm going to create an object of application user, which we have customized inside this identity model here, application user. So in order to create an object of application user, you can do this. Here we have created application user object. Inside that, we have passed username and email. In order to pass values for extra parameters, first name and last name, you can do this. Finally, in order to create the user with given details, you can do this. We have called create function from manager or user manager, and we have passed this application user object with corresponding password. It will return an object of identity user, and we will return that object from this method return result. As per ASP.NET identity, password should have minimum 6 characters, but inside this Angular 5 application, we have specified minimum 3 characters. Okay, in order to change that default validation for password, you can do this. Manager.password validator is updated with required length 3. So here we have created web API method register to create a new user. Now let me run this application. So here we are going to consume register method from web API project inside this Angular application. So here we have a small problem, which is CORS, CORS, cross origin resource sharing. That means this WebAPI project will block requests from another application which is hosted in a different domain or different port number like this. In order to allow requests from this port number 4200, we have to enable CORS inside this WebAPI project. For that, we are going to add a new package, a NuGet package inside this application. For that, select this project from Solution Explorer, then go to Tools, then Library Package Manager, then Package Manager Console. In order to install the package, you can use this command, install package Microsoft.AspNet.WebApi.Cors. Then here is the version, hit enter. So here we have successfully installed the package WebApi.Cors. Now if you build this solution and reload this WebAPI project, some of you may get this error. So it's due to the version difference between WebAPI.Cors and system.web.http. For that, you can do this. Open your package manager console, then use this command, update package Microsoft.AspNet.WebApi, then reinstall. I have given these NuGet command in video description. You can copy paste from there, hit enter. After that, you can run this command, install package Microsoft.AspNet.WebApi.Core version 5.2.3, which is similar to this WebAPI.Cors which we have installed first. Hit enter. Now everything should work as expected. Finally, as part of enable CORS, we have to enable requests from localhost 4200. So we have to add this configuration inside WebAPI config.cs file like this, config.enable CORS. Here we have to use this namespace. Now we can consume this WebAPI method register from this Angular application. Now I'm going to call this WebAPI method register from this Angular application form submit event. Okay, for that, back to Visual Studio Code editor. In order to wire up a submit event for this form, we can do this. ng-submit on submit function will be called. Into that function we will pass local reference for this form. Now we want to define this function inside the component TypeScript file here. On submit, for this function we have a parameter form. It's of the type ng form. Now in order to consume the WebAPI method from this Angular application, I'm going to add a new function inside this user service class here. Okay, so first of all, let me add import statement for classes from Angular Core and RxJS. So here it is. Here we have HttpClient. We are going to consume WebAPI method using an object of HttpClient. Then we have response observable from RxJS, and here we have map operator from RxJS. First of all, I will declare a variable read-only root URL, which is the base URL for this WebAPI project. Okay. Now I'm going to inject this HttpClient class inside this user service class. For that, we can add a private parameter inside this constructor like this, HTTP of the type HttpClient. We can define the function register user. For this function, we have a single parameter user. It's of the type user model class. For that, we have to add import statement for the class. So use the shortcut, hold Control, then press period, then use this import statement. First of all, we have to add the body part, which is the data from the form for each properties. So here it is. Here we have the body of the request. We have username, password, email, first name and last name. Finally, in order to make the post request into this register WebAPI method, we can do this. We will call this post function from HttpClient object HTTP. We have passed the exact URL of the method, and here we have the data for that post request. Finally, we have returned that observable from that HTTP post request. So now we have done with this user service class. Now back to component TypeScript file. Inside this component class, in order to call this function register user, we have to inject this class inside this component. For that, we have to add private parameter inside the component constructor like this. Private user service, it's of the type user service class. Now we want to add the corresponding import statement. Now we can call this user registration function like this. This dot user service dot register user. For this function, we have to pass values for this user object. That means values for each input element from this form. In order to retrieve that, we can do this form dot value. It will contain values for each property from the form. This function register user will return an observable. Now we want to subscribe to that observable, subscribe, and I'm going to define an arrow function inside this subscribe method with a parameter data. So here it is. So this data parameter is a JSON object corresponding to this identity result. So whenever this operation succeeded, we can identify like this. If data.succeeded is true, we can say that registration is successful. So in that case, we can call reset form function by passing this form object form. Now let me save all of these modifications. Then back to this Angular 5 application here. Sorry, here we have a small error. No provider for service. Sorry, we have to add this user service inside app module.ts file here. We just need to add user service inside this providers array. User service, we have to add import statement for this user service. Along with that, we have to add HttpClient module inside this imports array here, since we have used that HttpClient inside user service. So now let's add import statement for this HttpClient module. Before running this application, make sure that WebAPI project is running from this port number. So in my case, it is this. So let me copy this and pasting here inside this root URL. Now let me add a new user. Username will be Bruno123. Then password will be 1234. Email will be bruno@gmail.com. Then first name will be Bruno. Second name will be Nash. Click on submit. So this form is reset to its initial state. That means user registration is successful. Now let me check our database here. Right click on this user table, then select top 1000 rows. So here we have the record for Bruno Nash. Finally, inside this application, I'm going to install npm package for showing notification messages for success and error operations. So it will be ngx-toastr, which we have used in previous projects. In order to install the package, let me open one more terminal here, then use this command npm install ngx-toastr, then --save. So currently we are installing the package. So here we have successfully installed the package ngx-toastr. We have to add the style sheet from this package inside this application. For that, open your Angular CLI.json file. Now we have to add the style sheet inside this styles array. We have installed the package inside this folder, node modules ngx-toastr. Okay, here is the style sheet toaster.css. Now open your app module.ts file. Then add these two classes inside this imports array here, toaster module and browser animation module. Now let's add import statement for these two classes. Browser animation module from Angular platform browser animations. Then toastr module from ngx-toastr. Okay, now back to our component, sign up component here. In order to use this ngx-toastr inside this component, we have to inject toastr service inside this. So first of all, let me add import statement for toastr service here. Now we want to add a private parameter inside this constructor, private toastr. It's of the type toastr service. After successful user registration, we want to show a message like this: user registration successful. For that, we can do this toastr.success function can be called. When there is an error, we can do this, else this .toastr.error function can be called. Into that function, we will pass the first object or first error message from arrays array. Now let me save all of these modifications. Since we have made a change inside this Angular CLI.json file, so first of all, let me stop this development server. For that, you can use this shortcut Ctrl+C. Then it will ask this question: terminate batch job or not. Press Y for yes. In order to rerun this application, you can use ng-serve:\open. So here we have the application. I'm going to add one more user, Fiona123. Password will be 1234. Then first name will be Fiona, second name will be Green. Click on submit. So here we have the success message: user registration is successful. Let me check the database here. Let me execute this command, select command. So here we have the record for Fiona Green. Okay, so in this tutorial we have discussed how to implement user registration or user sign up in Angular 5 with Web API using ASP.NET Identity. In the next video, using this Angular 5 and Web API project, we will implement user authentication, login and logout with token-based authentication. You can download this project source code from the link given below in video description. If you found this video helpful, please thumbs up this video, and for more awesome videos like this, please be subscribed to this channel .NET Mob. Please like and share this video with your friends and colleagues so that they can benefit from this. Have a nice day. Bye.